Hi everyone, my name is Frances Nicol. I am the 4-H educator in Madison County, and at Ohio 4-H Conference this past March, I was going to teach a session about time management for camp counselors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and the things that we would have covered and the activities that I have for you to work on at home to prepare for camp this summer. So go ahead and get started. So like I said, we're going to be talking about some time management skills. So what I want you to do first is, and you can pause this video if you need to, is just kind of reflect on a time that you had to adjust your program due to timing issues at camp. We've all been there. We've all had, times that we've had to kind of adjust our plan a little bit, move things around, whether it's for weather, whether you're waiting on some campers, whether you're stuck in the cabin and just need a few extra minutes. So think about a time that you have had to adjust your program due to some timing issues. So one example that's pretty common is maybe you're at a workshop or program and some of your campers arrive early, but you're still missing half of the group. So you can't really get started on the program. So you want to engage those campers that you have. So think about something that you would do to engage those campers. Maybe it's a game that you can play with them. Maybe it's something you do pretty common. Maybe they help you set up for the workshop. So there's lots of opportunities there to still engage those early campers. Another example that's pretty common is you have 10 minutes of downtime in your cabin during the day. So maybe this is right at the end of kind of your rest time. Maybe it's at the end of the evening. Maybe you're stuck in your cabin waiting out a rainstorm. So you have some 10 minutes to think about some games you can play with your cabin and to keep them engaged as a group. Another example is it storms during your scheduled session and it's supposed to be outdoors. We can't always control the weather, right? So we always have to think of a plan for some way that we could make our activity work indoors if we had to, because we can't predict the weather in Ohio. So what are some things that you would do? And if you want to post some of these things in the comments on this video, that would be great, and you guys can share some of your ideas. But what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you a few activities that you can do to kind of fill the time for a few minutes. And I'm sure you have lots of other games and activities that you guys do as well in your camps that you've learned in your counselor training with your county professional or at another camp or school program that you're involved in. So what do you do when you don't have this time? So the key to keeping campers engaged is planning for enough time to complete the activity. So it all starts from the beginning. Counselors should be prepared for their session and have things in your backpack or toolbox ready in case of weather, time to fill, amount of campers, whatever. So it's important to have these things and to practice teaching them so that when the time comes, you can pull it right out of your bag, pull it right out of your toolbox, and use it effectively. So we're going to talk about some things that you can do as time fillers that don't require any props. You can always keep some props in your backpack if you carry around a literal backpack at camp, raccoon circles and other things like that. So there are lots of things that you can do to keep them engaged. The first activity is from Jim Cain's book, one of my favorites, Find Something to Do. If you don't have it, I recommend that you get it. It's just a small little book, tons of activities. So one thing you can do is subway greetings. So you huddle up in a close group and your feet are locked together as tight as you can, and you say time, and everyone has to shake as many hands of people as possible without moving your feet. And then you can do it in his next round, so they keep track in their heads of how many people they shake hands with. And then the next round, some people have left the subway, so now you can pivot 1 foot to shake as many hands, and then you see how many hands they can shake. So just kind of something fun and silly to fill the time, get people a little bit out of their comfort zone maybe, and then also get the group to kind of be together and laugh. So that's just a silly one. It's fun to do. The next one is Two Truths and a Fib, or Two Truths and a Lie from Cavert and Hammond. And this is where you kind of are in a circle with your tribe or a group of counselors or whatever, group of campers. And each person will tell two truths and a lie about themselves. And the rest of the group has to determine which statement is a lie. So for example, I might say, I have 2 nephews. I did gymnastics when I was younger, and I played basketball. And so the lie there would be that I played basketball, but the group would have to guess which one of those lies it is. So that's just a kind of fun. You can think of lots of silly things to do for lies. It's a way to get to know each other. Another fun time filler is longest line. So this is if you have a larger group, and this is again from Jim Cain's book, Find Something to Do. So if you divide the group into teams of 10 or 15 people each, and it can be any number of people, usually works better with a larger group. Give them 5 minutes and prompt them to talk about how they're going to make the longest continuous line with their bodies. And it's important that you just kind of leave it simple like that and let them do what they need to do with it. So 5 minutes to talk about how they're going to make the longest line, and then 15 minutes for them to actually implement their plan for competition. So hopefully you have at least 2 groups so that they can compete against each other. And again, it says 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever time you have, right? Maybe they only have 2 minutes to think of it and then 5 minutes to implement it. So you can flex around those times depending on how much time you have to fill. This next game is Line Up. So this is a fun one, and these are just a few examples of things you can do, but the options are endless. This is again from Jim Cain. So you line the whole group up, and you ask them to do different things to line up as a group. So maybe you ask them to line up by their birthday from January 1st to December 30th, but they can't talk. So they'll have to number with their hands or that kind of thing. Maybe then they have to line up from tallest to shortest with their eyes closed. You have to be a little careful with that one so they don't bump into each other. Or lining up from the first letter of their middle name from A to Z. So there's lots of different variations of that you can do and be creative and think of on your own. Just have them, give them little, kind of tasks to work on to fill the time. Another fun activity is called Switch, Change, Rotate. A lot of you might know this as bobsled teams. So you're in groups of 4 and you're lined up in a train formation with hands on shoulders, and you explain different commands. So change means the front person moves to the end of the line. Rotate means everyone rotates 180 degrees. Switch means the second person in line changes places with the last person in line. So you kind of let them practice on their own for a little bit, and then you lead into the competition of the bobsled team and calling out those different rounds. And you can go faster and slower and change them up. And then the last command is loose caboose, which means everyone has to scatter and find a new group of 4, and you can start over again. So that's a pretty, again, just a silly, fun one. They have to learn some communication skills. I mentioned before, but there's tons of resources and games out there. These are just a handful of activities that I like. Talk to your 4-H professional, use some things that you've done in your camp counselor trainings. Check out Pinterest and Google, and there's tons of quick games that you can play in variations. I even challenge you to, you can rename them or be creative and think out of the box and make it fit your camp theme for the year, maybe. I referenced the Jim Cain book, Find Something to Do. And there's also a fun one by Chris Cavert and Sam Sykes called 50 Ways to Use Your Noodle. So it's literally 50 games that you can play with pool noodles. So that's something we often have a lot of at camp sometimes for various reasons. So always some fun games to play there. So what can we do beforehand to make sure that we're prepared for camp? Obviously, we plan ahead. You guys go through counselor training. Not only are you learning things related to competencies and skills to do as a camp counselor, but you're also planning out your camp. So I encourage you to use that time both during your counselor training and outside of training. A lot of times it requires a lot more hours off the clock to plan camp and work with your session partners, committee members, all of those things. Even with the best laid plans, things happen at camp. We know that. We get thunderstorms. you know, you have to change up your program, people show up late, all kinds of things, you don't have enough supplies, whatever it may be. But planning ahead can ensure that we are ready for almost anything. So if you think of these things that can go wrong, you might have to plan for weather, what do you do if not everyone's there yet, those kinds of things. If you can plan ahead for those things that could potentially happen, then you can be a little bit better off. So one tool that I like to use when planning workshops is this workshop planning sheet. So here you can see an example I did with tie-dye, the tie-dye workshop, tie-dye and t-shirts. So you have your workshop title, any pre-session setup or preparations that I have to do. So anything I have to do before camp. So for tie-dye, you have to mix the dyes and put them in the bottles before you come to camp often so that they can set for a day or two. Maybe once you're at camp, you have to actually set up the different stations to tie the shirts, soak them, dye them, and then maybe ahead of time, it's probably a good idea to create examples of the shirt. So, or any type of craft or activity you're doing, you usually want an example to show them what they're going to be making. And then you write them out from 5 to 10 minute increments. So this happens to be a 50-minute session. Maybe your sessions are an hour, maybe they're a half hour, however long that session is. Maybe you're planning your afternoon program with the whole camp. That's 2 hours long. So, you know, add on to it. And basically you just break down each increment. So at the beginning, all of the campers are writing their names on their shirt tags and putting them in the bucket to soak in the water. And then you know who is leading it. So if you're leading it with a co-counselor, make sure you're working together to figure out who's leading what part and what supplies you need. This is a good chance for you to brainstorm the actual supplies that you need to do it by the activity as you're going through. And then you can see there, you know, the different parts, everything from demonstrating the techniques, actually doing the activity, applying the dye, and then labeling the shirts and cleaning up. So everything from setup to cleanups on here. And then there's also a spot for you to make a to-do list as well. So this is where you can start to think, okay, here's my plan. Now what do we actually have to do between now and camp to make sure that it gets done? So make sure you take note of how long things actually take. So you might have to walk pretty far to get to a location. We're at Camp Clifton, and sometimes we have to trek down the woods a while to get to our location where we're teaching the workshop. Maybe you have to climb up the big hill at Camp Ohio. How long it takes you to set up. So hopefully you've had time to set up before the campers get there, but sometimes you don't. And so you have to kind of use them to help you set up. How long it takes you to give instructions, how long it takes you to walk through and demonstrate those activities. You often have to repeat it a couple times, especially for younger campers. Actually doing the activity, how long it takes, and hopefully you've practiced this at home before you come to camp to see how long it actually takes. And then your cleanup and return to camp. So all those things kind of build into factors. So start thinking of those things too that that are your camp specific needs that could affect the timing that you have. So time to think here and reflect. So pause the video if you need to. Think about some factors to consider when planning your sessions or programs. So we talked about a few of them, but start to think of some of those other factors that you need to consider. And they might be camp specific of where your facility is at or specific to whatever session you're leading. So here's some factors to consider. And of course, this list is not all encompassing. It's very endless. We talked about walking distance. Differing ages of campers. You might have, your camp might be just juniors, it might be just senior level 4-Hers, could be all of them. So you might have some 8-year-olds and you might have some 12-year-olds. And we all know from our child and adolescent developed knowledge, those are very different. So it might take them longer to do things depending on their differing ages or levels of ability too. The amount of campers doing the activity, if you only have 10, might go quicker than if you have 20 or 30. So thinking about the amount of campers that are signed up for your session. The number of activities or stations offered. So maybe it's a craft sampler and they have different stations. Maybe they walk through different steps like tie-dye, where they have to go through different stations and do them in a certain order. So think about how many stations you have set up and how you can split up the group. Rain plans, we talked about. If you've got weather, if it's supposed to be outdoors, how can you do it inside? How can you alter the workshop a little bit to make it work indoors? Setup and cleanup time, giving instructions. What else? So share these in the comments as well of what other things do you need to consider when you're planning out your workshops. And now it's your turn. So I have a blank copy of that same workshop planning sheet. So I want you to try this out on your own. And on the, when you talk to your county professional, you can download this planning sheet and work through, or you can kind of copy it from this video and make your own template. So think of a session or program that you are teaching at camp this year, or maybe co-teaching or planning to teach, or that you want to teach. And then plan out each 5 to 10 minute increment of the session with this worksheet from setup to teardown, just like we did with tie-dye. You can rewind back if you need to see the example. Think about all those factors that we talked about to consider when you're planning something. Create those lists of supplies needed. And if you're co-teaching, determine who's leading each part. And then create that to-do list to work on between now and camp. It's time to reflect here. So I want you guys to think of what are some other important aspects of an activity that you need to consider when filling time. Do you have any other ideas that can be utilized? And why is it important to consider factors and plan out our time for our programs before camp? So think about how important time management is. And we think about it for camp, but also for your personal lives too, especially right now. You know, you have to plan out, you have to be able to manage all the activities you're in, your camp counselor trainings, your sports, whatever it may be. And it's just as important to do that at camp. And it's a pretty intense skill that you need for the workforce someday too. So now, like we said, we can think about plans that you'll make to be prepared for activities at camp this year. Create that list of factors to consider and think of all those what ifs while planning, right? If we can be prepared for all of those what ifs, what if it storms? What if some people are late? What if I don't have all the supplies I need? I have too many campers, whatever that may be. Think of all those what ifs and what your plan would be if that happened. And then have that backpack, right? Figuratively or literally maybe, of activities to do when you run out of time or you need an alternative activity. So thank you guys for listening, and make sure you download the worksheet and think about how you can manage your time better at camp this summer. If you guys have any questions, here's my contact information. And again, thank you for watching.